Hello, welcome to this week's paint along. We got another corner piece. This one's got like a little divot, so we've got kind of like some different designs so you'll get to see various ways to paint these guys. This time I put it on a holder. So we got coming in with same colors as we had before. We got shield brown right here. Right here we got a mix of mostly shield brown with some leather brown. That one. Then we go to leather brown. Whoops. This one right here is a mix of leather brown and vampiric highlight, and this one is like 50-50, pretty much exact. So yeah, start with the shield brown. You can do a little bit like of stippling on each layer, and that will really kind of like create a natural buildup of like textures, rock texture. You can also just do plain layering up and then wait till the last layer to really add in textures. You can also do wet blending, so like that would be like, here I'll show you. It's one layer, come on with another layer color. Oops, that was a little bit of a blurf there. Didn't mean to go into the crack. So that was just, you know, a quick wet blending effect. You don't get like the built-in texture if you do like some stippling and let it kind of dry and then stipple on top. So there's pros and cons. Like the wet blending definitely is like way faster, because that right there already looks pretty decent, you know? It's dry. You don't have very much texture, which is like the downside in general of like, it's a weird downside. It's weird to say it's a downside, but like it is kind of like, in a way, a kind of a downside with wet blending. Of it's not really why you would use wet blending. You're not using it because you want textures. You usually are using it because you want smoother blends, and it's going to be able to make it easy to get some really good starting. I would say it's really good at getting starting blends. Because you'll notice with there, we kind of lost our highest highlight in the darkest shadow. We got like, we have more of a mid-tone, although I just added some of, because I don't plan on keeping it like that. I want it to have texture. So yeah, even with wet blending, you still kind of have to go back in and kind of get like maybe glaze in or layer in like your darkest shadow and highest highlight, because I mean what you're doing with wet blending is you're painting while all the paint is still wet, and so it's gonna create a natural gradient. It's what it's really good at. It's just not good at making sure that you then still have, you know, your highest highlight and darkest shadows. Still can be a lot faster though, because then you're still just only doing like 2 small layers. Because you know those are both going to be small. I am noticing that this one in particular, actually, like, it's not just cracks in here, but we've got like ruts. So that's interesting. So I guess there is something even a little different I can show you tonight when I have an idea too what color to make them. This good old Driftwood brown will still play well with our other colors. They're pretty small, so I think you basically already have the dark shadow. If you count the base coat, is what I did. And then this will be mid-tone and a highlight. And that it is a color that is kind of already slightly grayed out, so that makes sense that actually that the Vampiric highlight is not doing much to it. I'm basically making it, it's kind of basically picking a color that is kind of more of a neutral brown, whereas the browns I'm using for the stone are very warm. Well, somewhat warm. They could be warmer even if you use like oxide brown. All right, there we go. It's also kind of still, like, even though it is more neutral, it is still kind of in like, so we've got very yellowish browns, I would say. Excuse me. Let's get a smaller brush. All right, so we got all of these ruts. We do want them to actually look a little different. And we know that the rock's already going to be kind of a warm yellowish brown, so we'll go neutral. So that's why we're going to go neutral with it. And if you look back, kind of rewind and go back to where the palette is on screen, you'll also notice that it's the values of what I'm using are also a little bit lighter than the colors, most of the colors that I'm using for the stone. So that's it. So we're doing neutral and then also contrast. It's going to help it stand out. And actually, you know, if you're kind of struggling to get the brush to stay pointed for whatever reason, um, or you don't have very good brush control, it would be good to probably do the roots first then, because then that way you can mess up and then you can just paint over it when you do the rocks. And you know, it's okay if you're having a hard time figuring out whether something is just a crack or like it's a rut, you know, it's fine to stop and just really kind of stare, look at it from different angles. It's like, you know, like right here, you know, from one angle, it looks like maybe this right here could be a continuation of the rut. And then looking down at from the side, it kind of looks like this comes down. And that this is just meant to be like an edge of the rock. So don't be afraid to like stop in the middle of your painting and or feel bad that you can't easily tell that like what something is. So I'm gonna tell you've got something painted and you've provided contrast with the paint. You have like zero contrast for your eyes to kind of go off of, or for cameras to go off of, really. I mean, I can get the camera to focus on this, but it's still not going to tell you, you know, like, oh, that's a rut, or that's just a crack in the rock. And also, if you paint it as a crack in the rock versus a rut, I mean, if you paint it that way and no one looks all that closely, no one's probably gonna notice, other than like, you know, maybe other more skilled miniature painters or those with well-trained eyes, good eyesight. Okay, so now for the highlight. Alright, back to the rocks. I don't think I had actually finished applying that. Technically be like second shadow color. You're pretty much always going to want to highlight the edges. And then anywhere where you kind of like built up more of the previous layer, you're gonna, so like you can see there's just areas that I left darker. We're gonna avoid those and we're gonna come in and start like a little bit further in. So which will help build that illusion slash accentuate any actual sculpted feature if it was already sculpted, which this does have a lot of actual sculpted like divots and stuff. Sometimes, like right there, I just went in and with this, sometimes I'll still go in and into a dark area, and it creates kind of just a different variation. for the building of layers and stuff. It kind of adds to that effect of getting kind of more of the rocky look. Anywhere that you are going to have a very sharp edge, though, you really do want to make sure you get that highlighted. You're continually building up a highlight with each layer. And it'll be less and less that you're covering, less and less of the areas that you're covering as you keep moving up in your highlights. You want to make sure that there's still some shadows seen, especially in areas where there are divots or edges. We'll have one more highlight that we'll do, and then we'll do a glaze, which will help kind of smooth out any areas, you know, like that have more obvious brush strokes, stippling. So we want there to be texture, but we don't want it to look like it was a brush that did it, even though we know that's the truth, is that it was a brush. We want it to look natural. So don't worry if this looks weird at first, like a bunch of dots or whatever, because you can glaze over it and kind of smooth it out so that it looks more like the variations in rock or the texture of rocks. All right, highest highlight. So again, it's gonna be very few spots that we're gonna actually put this on. A lot of it, in all honesty, we're gonna focus on edges that we want to be defined. And here, down here, I'm not going to, even though there are some edges, because this is like an actual divot. So we want to, in this area, we want to use this highest highlight to really kind of show or tell the eye that these areas that we're highlighting are up higher than down here. So that light is naturally hitting these things first, getting to, I think the word be dissipated by the time it gets down below. All right, now we're getting a little long. You pick basically the color that you want it to be tinted as. So I'm gonna go with that one. We will let the paint settle a little bit just to kind of see on the sides of the well how light or see-through it is of a glaze. So right now we have about 1:1, one brush full of this in here, plus a brush full of water to here. So you can see even here, it's a pretty decent coloring, which I think I'll stick with that. I would say it's not a heavy glaze, but it's not necessarily a light glaze. It could definitely be even lighter than that. And since this does have something other than just rocks on it, you'll want to be much more careful where you're putting the glaze. But, you know, if you watch just as the glaze dry, you should notice that it's smoothing out some of these different layers. And it's not the end of the world if still can see a lot of brush strokes. That just means that once it's dry, you can just come back with another layer of glazing. And likewise, if you realize you make too heavy of a glaze, or it's not even a glaze at all, and you put it on and you realize, oh shoot, I have now just like completely undone things. You can just always like take your shadow colors and come back in and do some stippling again, and then just thin down that glaze mix more so it's actually a glaze or lighter. So yeah, either way, it's not going to be the end of the world. And you will not have been the first person who has, you know, made that kind of mistake. Hopefully that is sort of encouraging to know. And there are some areas too, like right here, that I think I kind of looks like I forgot to get fully highlighted up. You can just go ahead and go back, come back with colors that you have mixed up. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. You can still see some of the texture. Might do even more another glaze or come in with the highlight. Actually, yeah. And come in with the highlight and smooth this out a little bit. The highlight also might need to get, it might need to be thinned down some more if it's, since it's not like going on like you would expect, kind of a layered. But there we go. That looks, can smooth it out just in general since we're wanting to highlight pretty much all of these anyway. And that looks pretty good. You can even go all around and just do that same thing and just kind of re-highlight some of the edges that are meant to be for sure standing out. But yeah, that's looking, I think that looks pretty good even just as is. And these, with the way Dungeons & Lasers have it built, is the idea is that these are like corner pieces, or you're matching all the corner pieces side to side. So along this side, it's basically meant to not be seen, is the idea. So it's not really worth painting. Just leave it dark. I mean, I did base coat it just so that it wasn't, you know, showing gray. The gray material. That is it for this week, and come back next week for part 3 of the corners. See you then. Bye.